It was just another evening at the Walgreens on South Gateway Drive in Madera, California. The store was busy with customers picking up prescriptions, grabbing last-minute essentials, or browsing the aisles. Employees chatted as they restocked shelves, unaware that within minutes their ordinary night would turn into a scene of terror. The air was calm, no tension, no warning signs. Then, in an instant, everything changed. A man walked into the store, his face unreadable, his movements deliberate. No one paid him much attention at first, just another shopper in a quiet town. But beneath his jacket he carried a gun, and in his mind a plan was already in motion. He didn't yell, didn't make a scene. He simply pulled out the weapon and fired. The first gunshot exploded like a crack of thunder, shattering the peaceful atmosphere. Screams erupted as people dropped to the floor, scrambling for cover. The gunman moved swiftly, his expression chillingly blank. He fired again and again, bullets tearing through the store. A mother of two, an employee just finishing her shift, collapsed to the ground, blood spreading beneath her. Customers hid behind shelves, their hearts pounding, some whispering frantic prayers. One man, a young Walgreens employee, didn't run. Instead, he rushed toward the wounded woman, pressing his hands against her injury, trying to stop the bleeding even as the gunman stalked the aisles. Nearby, an off-duty nurse dropped to her knees beside another victim, using her scarf as a makeshift bandage. Her hands shook, but she refused to leave. Every second felt like an eternity, the gunshots echoing, the smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Outside, car horns blared as people fled the parking lot, their tires screeching against the pavement. Inside, the gunman kept moving, his footsteps methodical, his intentions horrifyingly clear. The first 911 calls went out within seconds. Dispatchers heard screams in the background, voices pleading for help. Police officers raced to the scene, sirens wailing, their training kicking in. But for those trapped inside Walgreens, time had slowed to a nightmare. Some crouched behind the pharmacy counter, their breaths shallow, their bodies trembling. Others texted loved ones, not knowing if they'd make it out alive. The gunman's shadow passed by the aisles, and with each step, the terror grew. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the shooting stopped. The gunman turned and walked out the front door, disappearing into the night. The store was left in stunned silence, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Blood stained the floor, shopping carts were overturned, and the air was thick with the metallic scent of fear. The quiet town of Madera would never be the same, but this was only the beginning. The manhunt was about to begin, and the community would soon learn the shocking truth behind the attack. Who was this gunman? Why had he targeted an ordinary Walgreens? And would justice come for the victims whose lives were forever changed in those terrifying minutes? The answers would unfold in ways no one could have predicted. The first police officers arrived within minutes, their patrol cars skidding to a halt outside the Walgreens. The scene was one of pure horror, people staggering out of the store, their clothes stained with blood, their faces blank with shock. Officers rushed inside, guns drawn, unsure if the shooter was still lurking among the aisles. The wounded lay where they had fallen, some moaning in pain, others eerily still. Paramedics swarmed the scene, their medical kits flung open as they triaged the victims. One officer radioed in a frantic update. "Multiple gunshot victims. We need ambulances now." The gunman was gone. But where? Word of the shooting spread like wildfire. Within minutes, Madera was plunged into panic. Parents called their children, fearing the worst. Schools and businesses locked their doors as police issued an urgent shelter-in-place order. "Armed and dangerous suspect at large," the alerts blared. Helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights cutting through the darkness. Every patrol car in the county was mobilized, their sirens screaming through the streets. Detectives scoured the Walgreens security footage, their stomachs churning as they watched the gunman move with terrifying calm. He hadn't worn a mask, hadn't even tried to hide his face. It was as if he wanted to be seen. The footage showed him firing, then casually walking out as if he'd just finished shopping. Who was this man? And why had he done this? It didn't take long for investigators to identify the shooter. His name was Patrick Lesieur, a 38-year-old with a history of mental illness and run-ins with law enforcement. Neighbors described him as quiet, even withdrawn. But no one had expected this. Police traced his last known address to a run-down apartment complex on the outskirts of town. A SWAT team surrounded the building, their rifles trained on the door. But when they stormed inside, the apartment was empty. Lesieur had vanished. While the manhunt raged on, the survivors of the Walgreens shooting fought for their lives in the hospital. Among them was Maria Gonzalez, the employee who had been shot first. Doctors worked frantically to stop her internal bleeding. Her children, ages 7 and 9, sat in the waiting room, their faces streaked with tears. Another victim, James Carter, a retired firefighter, had been picking up his heart medication when a bullet tore through his leg. He dragged himself behind a shelf, using his belt as a tourniquet. Then there was Lisa Tran, a college student who had stopped in for snacks. She had been crouched behind the checkout counter, her phone clutched in her shaking hands, whispering to the 911 dispatcher, "Please hurry, I don't want to die." Hours passed with no sign of Lesieur. Then, just after midnight, a call came in from a trucker at a nearby gas station. "I think I just saw your guy," he told police. "He was acting real jumpy, bought a soda, and took off on foot." Officers flooded the area, K-9 units sniffing through back alleys and abandoned lots. Then, at 1:17 a.m., a spotlight caught movement behind a dumpster. "Hands up!" "Show me your hands," an officer shouted. For a second, no one moved. Then, slowly, a figure stood up, hands raised. It was him. Patrick Lesieur didn't resist. He didn't even speak. As officers slammed him onto the ground and cuffed him, his face remained eerily blank. Back at the police station, detectives interrogated Lesieur, demanding answers. But he just stared at the wall, his expression hollow. Had this been a random act of violence, a grudge against Walgreens, or something darker? Meanwhile, Madera struggled to process the tragedy. Vigils were held for the victims. Storefronts displayed signs reading "Madera Strong." But one question haunted everyone. Could this have been prevented? As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered disturbing details about Lesieur's past. Missed warning signs, ignored pleas for help. Had the system failed? The town wanted justice. But first, they would have to face the full, horrifying truth. As Patrick Lesieur sat in his jail cell, his hollow eyes staring at the concrete walls, detectives worked tirelessly to piece together what had driven him to commit such a senseless act. The more they dug, the more disturbing the picture became. Lesieur's social media revealed a spiral of paranoid rants and delusional posts, many of them targeting the pharmacy chain itself. In one chilling message, written just hours before the shooting, he had scribbled, "They're poisoning us, and no one cares. Time to make them pay." His family later admitted they had tried to get him help multiple times, but the system had failed him at every turn. Missed appointments, underfunded mental health programs, and a lack of intervention until it was too late. Meanwhile, the survivors of that horrific night faced long roads to recovery. Maria Gonzalez, the mother of two, underwent 3 surgeries to repair the damage from the bullet that had nearly taken her life. Her children, once carefree and full of laughter, now clung to her at night, terrified of loud noises. James Carter, the retired firefighter, would never walk without pain again. his dreams of traveling with his wife now replaced by physical therapy appointments. And Lisa Tran, the college student who had hidden behind the counter, struggled with panic attacks every time she entered a store. The emotional scars ran deeper than the physical ones, and the community rallied around them, organizing fundraisers and therapy groups determined to show that hate wouldn't win. The trial that followed was a spectacle of grief and anger. Prosecutors painted Lesieur as a cold-blooded killer, while his defense attorneys argued that severe untreated mental illness had warped his reality. Survivors took the stand, their voices shaking as they relived the nightmare. One juror later admitted they had wept during Maria's testimony, where she described waking up in the hospital, her first thought being whether her kids would grow up without a mother. In the end, the jury found Lesieur guilty on all counts, but the verdict brought little comfort. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, a punishment that felt hollow to those who knew the real tragedy was that this could have been stopped long before the first shot was fired. In the years that followed, Madera became a symbol of both resilience and broken promises. The Walgreens, where the shooting occurred, installed a memorial plaque honoring the victims, but the town's demands for better mental health care went largely ignored. Politicians made speeches, activists held rallies, and yet nothing truly changed. The families of the victims found their own ways to heal, some through advocacy, others through quiet remembrance. But every April 12th, when the anniversary of the shooting arrived, the town would gather at dusk, candles flickering in their hands, whispering the names of those who had suffered. The wounds never fully closed, the questions never fully faded, and the haunting truth remained. This was not just one man's crime, but a failure that stretched far beyond him. The Walgreens shooting had ended that night, but its echoes would last a lifetime,